people knew about it. So I have some fun questions to ask you.
Ooh, yes.
I kind of went through your blog post that you wrote up, answering my questions already. And I picked out some stuff that I am curious to know more about and hear you talk about more. So
Sure.
I think this should be fun and casual and hopefully inspiring. So, first question. I'm curious how I know a little bit because I talked to you, but I want to hear about how your fiance is involved in music.
He is the exact opposite. So very heavy metal guitar.
Okay.
I have seen Iron Maiden, and we regularly go to see an AC/DC tribute band that one of his groomsmen is Angus Young in. So he kind of comes from a very different side of music, which is cool. And when he started guitar, guitar is his main instrument. He was actually more Bob Dylan and folk music, which is my speed. So our journeys started similar spots, and then we went very far away.
Yeah,
but
that's good because you can complement each other that way.
Yes, and I think I've helped him get a greater appreciation. I don't know. I think he'd agree. I've helped him get a greater appreciation. We go to lots of concerts, or whenever I perform, or whatever the case may be. If my students are performing, he'll come and support. So he gets to see some of that more. And obviously he's taken me to some concerts I probably wouldn't have gone to. So
yeah. And I think it's really healthy to expand our horizons that way, because left to ourselves, we would just, only do classical and
right.
Right. There's stuff to learn from the other music, the other genres as well. So
yeah.
And of course your students are showing up and asking to play some of that stuff sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, some of them think it's hilarious. But they're just like, what? You know that song? No way. Yeah. Oh yeah, I do. I hear it all the time.
Right. Yeah. So I really appreciate you taking some time out right before your wedding. Like, isn't your wedding like next week?
Next week. I saw some of my students for the last time tonight. So it's been really sweet to have this kind of time with some of the families that I've had, because some of them I've had for 5 or 6 years, and they're like, I remember when, and you guys are so sweet. I remember you before he was around, and they're very congratulatory, and it's been nice to share it with them.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I think that's really neat. But I can tell you, right before my wedding, I wouldn't have been doing this.
What can you do?
I admire you. You're more on top of things than I was, I have to say.
We'll see. I feel pretty good right now. Maybe by Sunday afternoon, I won't be feeling that way.
You'll get married anyway, and that's all that matters.
That's right.
So next thing I wanted to hear, you said you do some freelancing, which I think is awesome and super important as a teacher, to be performing and keeping yourself active in playing. I'm curious to hear, for other musicians' sake, how you come about your freelance opportunities. Do they come to you, or do you seek them out?
Most of them come to me, just because I'm lucky that I grew up in this area. So a lot of the teachers that I work with were teachers when I was a student and growing up, or I worked with them in community music schools, or I took lessons with them. So when I graduated and was starting in the area, probably 4 or 5 years ago, they would hear about a substitute, or there was a sudden opening and they needed someone to fill it. They would call me in, and that's led me to get some more of the regular gigs that I have, and I just take them when I can. I try not to let it impact my teaching too much, but I have a gig in 3 weeks with a orchestra that I haven't played with in years, and I'm like, oh, it's stressful.
Yeah, it can be stressful to go back, even though we used to do it and be, really comfortable.
Yeah. Right. But I think it's good, because I always come back and I learn so much usually from the other performers that are there, because they do it all the time. that's
Right.
their bread and butter, and they do it every weekend. And it's like, I usually sit like semi in awe during the rehearsal time, like, oh, your bow hold is perfect, and how do you just know? And it's amazing. They're very inspiring people to play with, and I think it's easy to forget that when you're playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star day in and day out. And or I mean, even, you know, you could go up to like the sights or Vivaldi concertos and still be like, oh, there's music beyond this. That's right, I forgot.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, and surprising, I think, how much, you know, when you put yourself in, you surround yourself basically with better players.
Mm-hmm.
It's surprising how much it rubs off on you in a way, you
Right.
know?
Yes. Well, it's their mindset, because you get to see, they kind of expand your horizons a little bit and make you think, oh, I could be better. That's right. Like, good, let's do it.
Yeah. and you don't want to show up next week and still be so far behind them.
Right. I maybe I shouldn't say this, but like, luckily most of the gigs I don't feel like that's me.
Yeah. It can happen. Okay, so what about, oh yes, I loved that you talked about, you know, Hilary Hahn playing these Bach pieces that you're so familiar with. You've heard them tons of times, tons of different players, you've played them yourself, and yet she makes them new again, basically.
Right.
With her style, her touch. She's able to put her character into her playing and transform that musical experience. So I would love to hear you talk about that more. However, whatever direction you want to take it, I'm thinking along the lines of how do you help your students put their own voice on their music?
That's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, actually. There's another account that I follow on Instagram, and maybe you follow him too, Viola Greg.
Yes.
Is his name. He teaches down in Virginia, but he was posting something very similar about finding ways to express yourself in the music and almost to give yourself freedom to make choices, to remind yourself, you know, one teacher might say that a phrase should decay this way, and another teacher may say, well, no, the phrase is longer than that, you're supposed to go further, and finding ways to show your students that and allow them the freedom to choose it. I admittedly have a hard time letting go of control. So that's something I've been thinking of myself, because I'm like, oh, you know, my students aren't little babies anymore, and they have a voice, and they can make choices. So I try to, and I've always done this, but I'm trying to do it more these last couple of weeks. Say, well, how do you think this contrasts like with the section that was right before it? Or how do you think this would best lead up to perhaps this moment? What would you do something with the bowing, or what part of the bow do you think you should be in, something to that effect? And we try like comparison and contrast. So we'll try it like really low at the frog, and then we'll try it farther out. And sometimes I make choices I don't agree with, or you know, if they want to use like a different position, you're like, oh no, this is really emotional. Don't you want to be up in like fourth position? And they're like, no, I never want to be in fourth position.
Right.
Sometimes I just kind of have to be like, okay, we're not there yet. Like, and just let it go and let it happen. And I'm learning to let that happen more and more. It's hard, and it takes a while too, I think, to get students who perhaps can start to look at that nuance a little bit more and start to realize that there is a difference. Because I think, you know, still the vast majority, I have like 55 students or 55 private students or so right now, and I would still say probably 80% of them, they're just playing notes on a page, and we can try to talk about musicality, but they don't have a personal stake in it yet. It's more my students that I have had a long time, you know, 4, 5, 6 years, and they're getting to high school, and they go to the concerts. either with their school, or I organize field trips to our local professional orchestra. They get to see stuff like that. I feel like they are starting to understand.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
It's good to hear thoughts on it. I mean, and I think it's something that most people that are learning struggle with. And what I've observed mostly is that they've got to have some life behind them before they can really put emotion in. Because if you've never felt that kind of pain, if you've never felt the sadness, then how can you express it, right?
Right.
So there is that especially when it comes to kids and young people, but depending on how they've grown up, right?
That's very true, because I know my adult students do get that musicality so much faster, and so it seems that it's more innate with them, that they just that's and maybe it's because that's part of their inspiration for doing it in the first place. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I have to coach them as much with that. So that's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've tried to learn how to teach, and kind of not really come to a conclusion that you can't teach it, but to a point. You can only take it so far as a teacher, and then I feel like it has to come from within them, and you have to, as a teacher, encourage it out of them. That's kind of how you do it. But
and I just remember this too. I went to a really interesting master class on artistic development that kind of talked about this too. And at least they were working with really young kids, and it was something simple, but they did a story. And, I've tried that a couple times too. That worked really well, at least in that instance. But yeah, there's youngins.
Yes.
There's
Yeah. So let's see. What do I have here now? Oh yeah. You kept hitting on like my key points where I'm just like, oh yes, I'm so passionate about that.
Oh yeah.
I'm always or maybe those things just stood out to me. But anyway.
No.
I'm always talking about sharing music, and that it's something that's meant to be shared, and it is, like you said, it's a gift, and gifts are meant to be given, right? Or either given or received, but they're shareable for sure. And so you talked a little bit about performance as a natural way to share that gift, and I was hoping you could expound on that a little bit.
Sure. I think also in the blog post I mentioned having really severe burnout at the end of my music degree. And I think that's been a way that I've tried to claim it back, is realizing like my 4-year-olds have something to share, have that performance aspect to share just as much as any Hilary Hahn, James Inez, like any of those big names. So I think performance it can be as simple as you're just playing for a family member, but like they're still getting something out of that. And just because you're only playing something very basic doesn't mean that it's not valuable. And I think for me personally, like when I work with my students, I try to give them plenty of opportunities. Most of my students are not going to go into music. I hope they play. I hope they keep an instrument and that they play throughout their life. But I don't know. I don't expect them to go into music or anything like that. So we try to do some like community outreach too, and play for others. Frequently play at like nursing homes and things like that. I encourage them to do recitals for their families when they finish a book. And I think for them, that's what I try to focus on. And then with me, I try to remind myself, like, no, I'm not the greatest violinist, I know. But someone still enjoys it, so that's nice.
Exactly. Well, and that whenever my students are getting nervous for a performance, I'm always like, listen, everybody out there in the audience, they want to hear you play, and if somebody wants to hear you, I think it takes a lot of the pressure off. But no, for sure. I think I listen to some, obviously I follow a lot of different accounts on Instagram and whatever, and I'll be scrolling through my feed, and they might sound terrible, right? Sometimes they do.
No, you're.
And my husband is like, why are you listening to that? And it's because I appreciate it. I enjoy it. I don't care that they don't sound good, because I understand what they're doing and what they're working on.
And it's part of the process. Sounding bad is part of the process.
Yeah. You have to be willing to go there in order to get past it.
Right.
But yeah, definitely. It's a really awesome gift and I love that you do, nursing homes and whatever, because that's a huge blessing to those people that are there. And would you call yourself a Suzuki teacher, or do you just do a lot of the stuff they do?
I have done training for books 1 through 4 through their summer institutes. And what I have always struggled with is the parent involvement. It's not very common in my area. My area is very, we're up and coming, but we're very small. Suzuki's not trendy here. It's not a thing. It was not, there's not Suzuki teachers here really. So when my parents come in, they may sit in for a while, but they kind of go away. But I still really, really emphasize, and I think more than most teachers, I really, really, every week, did you do your listening this week? Did you, if mom and dad are still staying in or whatever, how was our practice this week? What did you work on? I try to keep that up and going, but it's a struggle. It is.
Yeah, because I wondered, because you had mentioned, you do the recitals at the end of the books. I think that's really cool. I think it would be neat if I could ever find a student that was willing to do a solo recital, all by themselves. It doesn't matter that it's little pieces,
right?
Right. So
I actually, I don't know why they go for it. I kind of present it to them as either you can do a book recital or you can do a book test, which sounds more enjoyable to you. So, and really, honestly, we do the same work. We do the same exact thing, but there is something about like the recital aspect, like seems really good to them. And I guess I've just been doing it long enough that I was able to talk about it, and I was able to say, well, such and such student, they just did their book recital for book 1. Like, isn't that cool? And so it's something that they know about and they look forward to. And then it's been, a lot of my kids right now, for whatever reason, that finished book 1 and they did a recital, they're getting ready now for book 2 at the same time. And they're like ecstatic. They can't wait, when doing book 1 was like pulling teeth. So I don't know, maybe that part's working out. Maybe that's a sign of good things, but
it sounds good. And exactly, because you've got others that they can watch and see that they did it, so why can't they do the same, right? It's a really, really good thing, and part of the reason that I encourage people to go to concerts and other recitals and whatever, because it's important to see that you're not the only one in that place. So okay, so final question for you, trying to keep it short and sweet.
That's okay.
So if someone was to follow your blog, your Instagram, email list, whatever, what kind of topics do you usually focus on? Like, what are you passionate about? What are they going to gain from that, I guess? What will they experience as they follow you? For those
Sure. I try to focus and I try to balance it so that there is something for the students that you can see. And I'm trying to balance that I have my really young students through high school and later adult. I think my oldest student currently she just had her 63rd birthday. And I have a, significant number in that, like 55, like getting to retirement age bracket, which is really nice. So I try to make sure I share that so that you can see other students and their progress and what they're doing. I try to share what teaching ideas or lesson plans I'm doing, so there's something there for teachers. And then some of the stuff is specific, I guess, to my studio too. Just like, okay, right now I'm getting married. Don't show up to lessons next week. So you might get some of that as well too. But I try to keep it balanced so that you can see what a studio does, and how your studio compares to maybe your experience in a studio, teachers you grew up with, or teachers that you're currently with. And if you see a good idea, hopefully it helps you continue on, and maybe it's something you can take what you're doing with your teacher or with your students. So
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I like that about your Instagram anyway.
Oh, thank you.
Where you're kind of, you know, we feel like we're in the studio. It feels like we're part of what's going on there, and I think that's really neat for your students too, to have, you know, that you're so active, and giving them those inside tidbits, I guess.
Yeah, I will say it's been really I don't know, gratifying maybe, and it's really been surprising to me how especially my high school students have latched onto the Instagram. Like, I saw your story and it was just great, and I was like, okay, you wouldn't have listened to me if I said that in your lesson, but sure, take it to heart at home, that's fine. So that's been a really fun surprise, and I feel like it's been good for boosting camaraderie too, because I have students that say, oh yeah, I remember that kid from the recital, like he's really come a long way, and then I can go back to that student and say other students are noticing your progress too, and that's been really nice. And I feel like
it sounds like it helps build a little bit of community in your studio, which is what I always felt like was really lacking when I was, you know, doing an in-person studio. It's like, I see these kids for 30 minutes a week and they never see each other except at the recital. And it's like, how are they supposed to stay motivated this way?
Right. And that's the nice thing, you know, you asked about Suzuki. That's why I loved the group classes. I love when I can do group classes regularly, because I get to see students that way too. And right now I'm in a spell where I don't have a group class space, which is frustrating. But they still say, like, just this past week, I had 3 pairs of siblings, and one of the pairs of siblings said, oh, those brothers still take with you? Like, what are they doing right now? I was like, well, there's still those crazy boys, but you know, they're working on it. they're still hacking away. They're doing good. Yeah. So that's nice. It's nice that they remember each other, and they can track their progress. So it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. It helps with that too. And that's what I've noticed so much with taking my studio online. You know, they're forced to make videos, right, Fran? And so then they have that to look back on. Constantly, anytime I can be like, go look back 1 month ago, go look back a year ago, and they have that, where, you know, otherwise it'd be only the recital if it got recorded.
right yeah
Well, thank you so much for hopping on and taking some time. I'll
of course
definitely use the recording and share it with people.